Voilà, voilà. Pascal ne veut pas introduire ce dernier panel. Non, mais c'est la fatigue. Pascal is a little bit tired after 2 days of forum, and so he don't want to introduce myself. So I have to introduce myself. I'm Philippe Reynaert. I'm head of a consulting company called XANADU, and I have the chance to be with you this morning to speak about something very important. So I need you to be, not like Pascal, to be really awake. I can see some people tired. I think that there was a big fiesta tonight in Motel 1. No? I don't know. So I have something for you just to help to begin. Okay, stop the music. I can't. So now you are awake, and me too. And we are here to speak about the revelation of a report that will leave no one indifferent. Not a consensus report that explains how beautiful and nice we are all. Not a fake report showing all our financing systems are the best in the world. And good news, no PowerPoint. No, a report that hits a bit and reveals that what the 700 professionals who have been interviewed for months by a multinational team really think. We have the chance to have with us the final author of this study. It's the result of a very long process initiated by Väst. And I'm sure, and I'm saying it because I believe it will be a landmark for the years to come. So you have a wonderful chance to be there this morning. You can say in the future, I was there, to your grandchildren. This report is here, is available today for the first time in real. You have it on the table there. Don't move now, at the end of the meeting. But it will be also available on for the download, and I'm speaking to the people looking at us in line for the moment. You can download it. Tomas will give the address because it's too complicated for me in Swedish. And so, may I ask you big applause for Tomas Eskilsson. And the first question for you, Tomas. Why did you embark on this crazy work?
Yes, we embarked on this journey 2019. So a little bit more than a year before actually the pandemic hit, we started thinking about the, oh no sound. No.
I give you mine.
So we go with another. Yeah, we started with this work 2019. We started actually discussing it already 2018. You can say that the process started really that we made a report about the capacity problems. And we made that report together with Olsberg SBI, and that was presented in Berlin 2020 in February. And many of the questions that we then went on with in this study are also addressed in that specific report about capacity, because we didn't see capacity as something isolated outside everything else. We saw capacity as sort of something that happened because we had changes in the ecosystem and in the power balance, and also that reshaped the situation for public funding. So then in October 2019, we started making interviews. and we did approximately 50 interviews before we had to stop, because we were absolutely fixated in the beginning that all interviews were going to be made in person. We should meet every person that we really wanted to have as a respondent in this study. And when the pandemic hit, of course, that became totally impossible. So we stopped, and we stopped for approximately a little bit more than a half year. And then we took it up again. And then we decided to actually do the Nordics as a sort of a pilot first. So we made 110 new interviews. We had already made some before, but 110 new interviews. And we also tried actually to present, so to speak, the result of that, because it was sort of a test. How can this work when we take it out and make it into a pan-European study? And then we started during the spring last year to actually find partners around Europe. So we have worked together with 9 partners, and we have divided Europe in different territories, sometimes linked to language, sometimes linked to historical specificities, and sometimes because it just felt natural. We have some certain problems in certain parts. Okay, how should we split here? And we were also it was important for us that as many as possible were going to be interviewed in their own language. So we should lose as little as possible of the actual answer, the meaning in those answers. They shouldn't get lost in language confusion. That was also very important for us. We also created some think tanks, and we have done this study in collaboration with Cinéma, who has been really, really engaged across the entire study. And then also in more like a looser type of cooperation with Nostradamus, the Gothenburg Film Festival initiative that I guess most of you have heard about. So, and then in total, it's a bit tricky. Should we include the 50 we made from the beginning or exclude them? But if we exclude them, we made a little bit more than 700 interviews across Europe. And in this case, it's not across the European Union. It's across Europe. And then we also started doing something that we called dialogue, workshops, seminars, whatever. Could be for smaller or bigger groups. Often like 2 to 3 hours long, where we discuss the same topics, and that makes it possible for a lot more persons to actually engage in this discussion and give their opinions. So in total, a little bit more than 3,500 persons participated in these dialogue workshops, most of them digital, of course, because of the time. And you can say that it's very important to understand the report as the voice of the respondents. The only thing that is not the voice of the respondents is actually recommendations, because it's our own recommendations. And we were a small editorial team. That's our recommendations. But otherwise, the main source is the respondents. And these dialogue seminars. You can also say that we used the think tanks, but they were used predominantly for discussing recommendations. They were more or less what we used as somebody to discuss recommendations with. The backdrop of this, first it's very important to say that the editorial team, myself, Bengt Toll and Katarina Krave, we have close to 100 years working with public film funding. Together we have close to 100 years. Professional experience of working with public film funding on national, transnational, national, and regional level. So we have a big heart in public film funding, and that because somebody probably think that we are very critical, but that's because we love public film funding, and we love selective public film funding, because this study is predominantly about selective public film funding. And we see selective public film funding as absolutely crucial if we want to have production in the future of films and audiovisual work with a strong, call it cultural reference, significance, whatever word you want to you want to use, to the specific territories, the very diverse landscape of Europe. If we want to keep on to that, selective film funding is crucial. So that's very important to say. And we think that there is a future for selective film. That's also important to say. A future for selective, even if we come back to that towards the end of this show. But there is a good future for selective public film funding. But arguments and also part of the operations need to be rethought and reshaped to make it still relevant, attractive, urgent, because its urgency, I also think, is a very crucial word in this context. So what happened from 2016, 17 and onwards? Yeah, basically we had the content boom, the avalanche, the deluge, whatever type of word you want to use for an enormous growth in production, but also an enormous growth in capital. And also something that I think transformed the possibilities in many territories in Europe, not all, but in many territories in Europe, when global American-owned VOD services or studios, in the end of the day, became even in certain parts of Europe, the main commissioner of local content, the main financier of our own content. So that's, of course, a game changer for what should then... And one public service broadcaster described it like this, and I think it's very, very on the dot. She said, basically, 2018, we were a very big fish in a small pond. 2021, we are a very small fish in a big and growing pond. And that's sort of the drama in this change, you can call it. And of course, there's already before this, because digitalization and globalization have changed the ecosystem, the world we live in, how it functions. It has changed business ideas, business models, more or less for all type of groups, for producers, for distributors or right management companies, whatever you like to call them, for exhibitors, movie owners, for broadcasters, for what we can call regional or local streaming services, because they don't work in the same context anymore, for international film festivals. So more or less for everyone. And of course, if it changes things for everyone, then it also changes the framework that public film funding need to exist in and what it needs to address. And of course, I cannot give you I cannot describe the content of this very thick report. And beside this report, there is 10 territorial reports that you will be able to download, I think, Tuesday or something next week. There is Michael Gubbin's text about streaming giants and public film funding, and there is also Wendy Mitchell's text about, in May, about creators and the content boom. And more will come. So it's a big material. So this is more to start a discussion, because we think the report is there to start the discussion. We don't think we have all the answers. We don't think we are close to having all the answers, because this will be a very crucial discussion the years to come. And new things will happen. The war in Ukraine, whatever, the invasion, Russian invasion in Ukraine, that will also reshape economies, possibilities in different parts of Europe. already have happened actually when we look to our own field, and things will happen, and we are perhaps only in the beginning of a quite big ongoing change that will still be driven by a little bit digitalization, but mostly globalization. Because I think it's very crucial to understand that globalization is an extremely strong driving force today.
Thank you, Tomas, for this introduction. There is so much to discuss in this report that we decide to need a collective intelligence to speak about. And so we invited 9 experts, but I will call them 3 by 3. Yes, you can count 3 by 3, it's 9. So the first panel will be a panel composed by 3 brilliant producers. So may I call David Grumbach, Erik Glijnis, and Jean-Yves Roubin. Please, gentlemen. There is no gender equality in this panel, but
We were supposed to have gender equality, but strange things happen.
Yes. Carol Scotta wanted to be there, but it was not possible. So we have Erik to replace her, and so it's perfect. A little word about those 3 gentlemen. David Grumbach is from Back Film, a man with 2 countries in his heart, Luxembourg and France. He can sing like Joséphine Baker, J'ai 2 amours, Mon pays est Paris. Erik, I said it is from Lemming Film, a very famous company in the Netherlands and in the world, of course. And he is also a member of a very interesting network called the Creatives. You will have to speak about this, of course. And last but not least, I like this expression, last but not least. When I'm in a panel, people say last but not light. Don't know why. Last but not least, so Jean-Yves Roubin from Frakas production in Belgium, but also the chairman of the Belgian French-speaking producers, and without any contest, the producer with the nicest shoes in our panel. Show, please. Show the shoes. So it's a bit of a trap that you are here, because when you answer to the survey, you were promised that all this will remain anonymous. And now you are in the front of everybody to say what you are thinking about public funds. Fortunately, I'm sure the 3 of you love public funds. Yes? Yes, say yes. And especially the public funds in your countries. So, first question, gentlemen, do you have the feeling that public film funds are in transition, like Tomas said? Or do you feel that they need to change? And if yes, in what aspects and how? Maybe, David, you can begin, because there is nobody from the Luxembourg Film Fund in the stage.
So thank you for the invitation. Hello, everybody. I don't know if you all looked at the reports, but I was impressed. I'm not used to read such reports, but looks pretty hard work. So I think I want to start by a little out of context that yes, I'm thankful to Film Funds, because I started as a European co-production, doing a lot of co-production. Actually, my second project was with Jean-Yves. We co-produced a short film. And without the Film Fund, I would have never been able to be here, to be the head of Back Film in France, etc., by doing more or less, started with many co-production with all the European countries. So I think what I'm trying to say is that the Film Fund are key and central to our industry. And yes, there is a lot of questions, very good questions, a lot of critics as well. But you know, there is one provocative question you asked, like, does in 2030 a film fund will exist? I would rather say, does Netflix will exist in 2030 rather than the film fund?
And they've been swallowed up by another American, even bigger company.
Yeah, but what I mean is the film fund are state body, and I think as long as European states wants to support creation, wants to have its own culture, on the side of European culture, and then you know, there is a mix of national production, because it's very important to have our own local production. Then the economical funding for the international co-production, and for the more in the industry creates jobs and to invest money into the country, blah blah blah. So I would, well, you follow me, right? What I'm willing to say is that, of course, we can do things better, and there is a change in the industry, but I would not maybe emphasize that there is the old world and the new world. It's just the same world. We have to live together. We have to embrace both strengths and weakness of the two way of distribute. And actually, that's what I would maybe add. We can talk about it later. It's to maybe have a global vision. That's always what I try to do as a producer, and that's how I went that far that I became a distributor and a financier, to have this global vision of production and distribution. I think it's important. I think also it's important to insist on the development funding, because that's where the IP starts. And I think also we should try to push the European community to, you know, the media and Reimage are two amazing schemes, and hopefully in 2030 there will be more funding to help us all to make better film, and to keep control on IP, and to be able to work with whoever's going to distribute the film. But we have to know from up front if it's going to be a classic release or a digital release or a mix of the two. That was the start.
For the moment, it's good. So, you are very pacifist, and I noticed when making a part of the interview that it was a general feeling to say, thanks to the public fund, we support the pandemic, and they play the role that they have to play. But a majority of people, and producers in particular, knowing that they are anonymous, said, yes, but things have to evolve. For example, and I will ask to Jean-Yves maybe, one thing that was very present in the interview is that when speaking with streamers, everything is going pretty fast. And there is a difference between this discussion and the discussion you can have with public fund in general. They are maybe a little bit too slow for you?
Well, yeah. David said like a lot of very interesting stuff, and I've always known that he was a brilliant one. But indeed, on my side, I mean, the public funds are totally important for us, because, as he said, we don't know what Netflix is going to be or Amazon is going to be in like 2 or 3 years. I mean, I remember when I was at school, I was trying not to study, and I was watching Roland Garros at the TV, and I was always telling my father that I really want to stay till the end of the match, so I was certain not to study. And Roland Garros was on France Télévisions, what it's called now France Télévisions. Now you've got Roland Garros on Amazon, which is like, you know, in matter of culture, it's very, very different than what it was like 30 years ago. So maybe in 5 years, Netflix gonna like do only gaming. It's a possibility, or live sport. We don't know. So public fund, it's for me really the basis of our financing, and I think that we really need to work together and focus, as David said, also on development money, because we have a lot of counters around the world that can be, as I say, Amazon, Netflix, and so on. But we as producer, we really need to create with others IPs, scripts, and then find, of course, the production money. And I think, as you say, Philippe, my point of view is that it's very complicated to have such a slow movement with public funds. Sometimes it takes like 4 months to get an answer. And I had the case yesterday with a project I was on with Canada, and they asked me, we need to close today, we're Friday. And we need your regional fund letter, and we need your Eurimage letter. And I say, well, you know, the application on regional fund is today, so I cannot get an answer tomorrow, and Eurimage will be in a few weeks, and it takes like 2 months or something. So it's not possible. So we actually lost the movie. But I mean, it's like a very extreme case, but still, I mean, it's always takes a long time to receive an answer. And also, it's like I've been around in this business for like a little more than 20 years, and I really felt that it's more and more paperwork, administrative work. I mean, it's going worse and worse, I would say.
Thank you. I know that you are also a brilliant guy, not only David. And the third brilliant guy is Erik. And Erik, Tomas put the frame of this globalization of the business now, saying that we become little fish in a big pond. Maybe you have the solution, because you create with 7 others?
10 now.
10 now, others producer, a kind of networks. Can you speak about it?
Yeah, I mean, coming from the Netherlands and the Dutch language always made us, like, from the history of living film.
Can you hear it?
Is it working?
No.
Yeah, this is better, I think. Yeah, no, we're Lemming Film has a long history in being a very small fish on an international market with making Dutch films, both for a national audience and a worldwide audience. And in 2020, we started the talks, or we got approached by Hooecourt, a French production company that have been talking about setting up something, but it didn't have its final form, with independent production companies from around the world. And we worked together with Hooecourt on The Lobster. We were the Dutch co-producer, and they were the French. And they wanted to set up an alliance, a creative alliance of independent production companies that share knowledge, talent, maybe even a back office on long term. So during the pandemic, it really started going, and we would start talking every Monday about things that are happening in the industry and things that were most needed. And then what we felt was most needed back then, also due all the changes that have been mentioned so far, was development funding for series, which was a bigger issue. I also think that some of the turnover time on development for given like media, etc., is difficult, but for series, there's also limited chances. So we decided to partner up with 10 companies, and instead of being bought, we approached financiers that would step into our creative alliance called the Creatives in order to fund our development of series. So we are free to choose what series we develop. And that was the start of when we announced it. It's the first collaboration we have is on that series, and we're now working on several projects where we, and making feature film, because all the different companies have a long history in making feature film and television series. So we also work on series with talent coming from film. And the intention is also to work together. So we share, and by uniting, we are hoping to stay stronger and to take risks and to offer talent the opportunity to develop the things with us they want to develop and set the timeline for that development and fund maybe the development afterwards.
Can you name the country where the creatives are?
Yeah, so it's in France, it's Hooecourt and Unité. In Germany, it's Razor Film and Komplizen Film. Norway, it's Maipo Film. UK, it's Good Chaos, that's Mike Goodrich. Israel, it's Bero Films. The USA, it's Masha Maria Feldman. Belgium, it's Versus Production. Ooh, I think I have them now. Yeah.
You know, everybody in Europe can see that you don't know your partners. Tomas.
Yeah, I think something is very crucial to say, because when we made these interviews, it was very interesting because we interviewed more than 250 production companies. It's important to say, and because it's the biggest respondent group overall. And of course there are differences, territorial differences, very much linked to if the position that global streamers have in that market, and if you have actually left linear broadcasting. That was two very crucial. You can see differences in answer linked to those two elements, because it also transforms, actually, if you have left, it's also transformed how public service broadcaster behaves, and what they think, and things like that. But it's also very crucial to say that more or less, because we ask about themselves, but also about production companies. Okay, what will be the business model for production companies overall? And very often the answer differed. So the production company itself said, but for us, this is very important, but for the rest. And that was very strange, because for the rest it was, yes, volume and margin. Not that it was unimportant with owning IPs, because IPs can give volume and margin. So, but that was core, volume and margin. And also being more, yes, we can sometimes be the independent production company, the traditional independent production company, owning underlying rights, whatever. But sometimes we will use the possibility to earn money by doing things for the globals. Very few that we interviewed actually said that we will never do something for that side. One thing that was absolutely nearly 100% agreed upon among production companies is that you cannot make perhaps in France, but you cannot make feature films for cinema distribution without public money. That's impossible, because that's not a core interest from the perspective. Might be that they in the future will say yes to a short exclusive cinema window. I think even Netflix will say yes to a short exclusive cinema window, but that's also something that was quite interesting. So that become very clear that the thinking is much more flexible than when we talk with a lot of production companies like 4 or 5 years ago. You could see a transformation in arguments, a transformation in thinking, but very much linked to those aspects. And then you had certain parts of Europe where you don't have any, of course you can subscribe to whatever, Amazon, Netflix, Disney, whatever, but very little money pouring into local production. And then you had actually a lot of answers that said, but we want the globals to come, because we want them to stabilize our economy, our potential to actually produce, to survive, to have bread on the table. And also perhaps in certain parts of Europe, even if it's controversial to say, to give us more freedom of speech, not less, more freedom of speech. So even if we ourselves had sort of a pre-understanding that was more or less that, also from a public funding perspective, that public funds shouldn't engage, shouldn't fund content that are 100% owned, controlled, whatever, by a global streamer. That was, I think it became more gray for us when we went along and made these interviews. It was not so black and white in the end of the day.
David? Don't you think that there is a clear barrier between what is cinema or home cinema? You can consider the streamer either like a pay TV, when they come after cinema release, or when they do their 100% funded original, what they call Netflix original. Then I don't see why you would give support, when I say you, any film commission, to give support to those kind of films. Why? Because then the producer is definitely just a line producer, and he will keep a margin on the production. I see the interest maybe economically. It's good for a country to host some shootings, okay? But then if we have to use the money cleverly, I think we should focus on, again, well, then it's the discussion between audiovisual or film. But when we're talking to the film, about the film industry, about cinema versus home cinema, which in some territories, there always been support for film for television or film for cinema. I think it's important to keep that. I think cinema, whatever we say, whatever is going to be the level post-pandemic of the admissions, family going to go to the cinema the weekend, especially in mid-cities, you know, and friends, first dates, etc., etc. We're going to meet in the cinema at one point with friends, family, or whoever you want to meet with. When, let's put ourselves into the shoes of a cinema owner. If you, as a distributor or as a producer, you say, okay, take my film. Yeah, it's going to be on Netflix, but in 2 weeks or parallel or in 6 months, it's not the same discussion. And I don't see why a cinema owner would change his mind and accept to have a film that's going to be online very soon. I think we have to try to preserve this distinction, while still trying again to adapt this gray zone, which I would say maybe in one country it's going to be fully digital, but in another co-production country it's going to be cinema release. It has to be also, what we would say, more cultural. The film should be more concentrated on cultural or social or political aspects rather than pure entertainment, mainstream, and voilà.
Yeah, I mean, our personal opinion is that you should give, that public funds should give priority to cinema films, at least midterm, because that's, it's still a question mark, because the restart of cinemas have not been particularly positive so far in most parts of Europe, as you probably know. And I also think it differs a lot in different parts of Europe how you understand the window or media chronology, because it's not the same, for instance, in the Nordics as it is in France or something like that, because we have a much shorter cinema window. We had it already before the pandemic. And you can see also a lot of films actually right now perhaps doing 4 weeks in cinema and then be parallel. And they still work in cinemas. They still are screened in cinemas. So I think it will be, I don't think it will be one model or anything like that. But if we want to if we want to make it possible to make films for movie theaters also in the future, then the public sector and public money definitely need to be there, because I think otherwise that will get lost, and that will be very sad for art and culture overall, you can say. So I think that's still something that we strongly believe in, and most of the respondents also strongly believe in, because there is a big support for actually supporting cinema films with public money, but also much more money. Fewer projects and much more money, and we can come back to that. But then about very short, about the gray zone. And now I should quote the CEO of the Danish Film Institute, because he participated in a similar thing that we made for the Nordic Film and TV Fund. So I'm not quoting his interview, but I'm quoting what he actually said there. And he basically said, yeah, but it's perfect the gray zone is perfect for Danish films. Perfect. Because if we can create a situation where we secure that we have distribution, cinema distribution in Denmark, that we have a transaction window in Denmark that are like before. And then we can close financing with a global or a regional streaming giant, like Viaplay or something in the Nordic context, and have global spread. That Danish content will be spread globally. Then it's good. It's absolutely perfect. It's a perfect solution for most films, not for all films, because you will have the prestige art house movies that will not be handled or dealt with in that way. But you will have more Danish content. And that's sometimes very important for some public funds, not for all, but some public funds, the spread, the visibility. And still, this is license deals. It's not giving away ownership to the global streamer because it's a license deal. It's often a no, we shouldn't talk about because it's business affairs. We shouldn't talk about those. But there is a limited period where that particular player have, so to speak, the SVOD, the exclusive SVOD rights. Perhaps sometimes excluded a short, actually public service window in the country of origin. That's also a combination that we have seen. So this is a very interesting field, and I think particularly perhaps for smaller countries.
Thomas, I have to stop you because time is flying, and everybody wants to hear one more time Jean-Yves and Erik. And so I think that something that everybody can agree on is that flexibility and agility will be the two main words in the next months and years. Flexibility and agility, is it a dream or a possible reality for public fund, Jean-Yves?
Yeah, certainly. It's once again, we have to work together, and us, I mean, we as producers have to be very careful also not to be, we are independent producer, we cannot be dependent producer from for platforms also. And public funds have this possibility to help us to work on certain kind of movie or features films or series. So we really have to work together, and public funds have to listen to us because we are on the field, and and hand in hand, I guess, yeah.
And you, Erik?
No, absolutely. I think that, like, the last 2 years have proven how funds react. I've seen the differences, maybe mostly visible in our country, how, for instance, TV or our national film picked up the crisis and supported independent producers. And I'm very thankful, obviously, for the Dutch system. To get a little bit back on, so the flexibility has been tested, and we need to stay flexible in the times coming ahead with all that is changing. And I think what Thomas just said was interesting. I think we're coming from a position from the Netherlands that the most part of our finance plan, let's say 70 to 90% of, let's say, art house films, is funded with cultural funding. We have the luxury to fund that throughout Europe. But it's actually that other part which is harder, the equity or the hard money coming in. And for us, selling parts of territories to a streamer, or in this case, like you described in Denmark, is definitely a possibility. So we're trying to be flexible in readjusting our finance plan by having the new sources, but by that keeping ownership, keeping the independence of making what we want to create and using all the content for war in our advantage, which is proven to be super difficult. So that a word on flexibility, but I think that's needed from all sides, but we know where to expect it from. Yeah.
And congratulations, Erik, because I saw that Bero was smiling when you speak, so you have a bright future. You have a bright future. Gentlemen, I have to give the floor to other people, so thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. So we have to change the little. Is there somebody can help me for this? Yeah. So Thomas, are you ready to meet the film funds? You are not afraid?
No, I'm not afraid. I belong to film funds myself. Absolutely not scared.
Okay, nice. So do you want to say something more about the public funds before they are coming?
No, but this is supposed to be about purpose, and the reason for public film funding in the mid-term future. And you can say like this: in in many countries in Europe, language was a core reason for public funding to secure, and also historically a core reason, to secure production in our own language. Of course, also with some sort of flavor of le terroir, but very important to really. But then when you suddenly have others commissioning a lot of content in your own language, then of course that argument becomes a lot weaker. So then you need to start thinking about, okay, how can we formulate ourselves about the purpose? But I also think there is more on stake, because you can also see, I'm in favor of a move from a pure film policy to an audiovisual policy. But I can also see risk element in that transfer from film policy to audiovisual policy to include more and more formats and expression. And because I think it's very important, particularly on the longer term future, that public decides what it's really there for. Where is public money actually desperately needed, and where can actually the world survives without? Because the public money will not be able to fund everything in the audiovisual sector in the future. So what should be the priorities?
So, to react to this important declaration, I will ask to Kristina, Börjeson, Bero, Beyer, and Gregory Faes to join us, please. Are you on the right place? Yes, wonderful. So, just a few words to introduce yourself. Kristina, you are the head of production in Väst, and you are in a tricky situation, since you can't say anything negative about the report of your colleague. But let's see. Bero Beyer, the CEO of the Netherlands Film Fund, and huge friend of Guy Leiden in Luxembourg. Bero, you will have to confess to us what is the big plot you are both planning. You will. And last but not least, I will say it anytime, Gregory Faes, the famous manager of, let me breathe before I say it, Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes Cinéma. So applause, please. And we will try to do together a reality check, because we can say everything is going well, of course, but we are in face of some facts that we have to play with. So, first question, what are the obstacles existing for selective public film funding to maximize your purpose? Who wants to begin? It's for Kristina. No, don't be afraid. Bero will speak a lot. I'm
yeah,
sure.
obviously it then. No, the obstacles again for the funding of the selective funding is a huge question. I mean, now when I used to work for the Swedish Film Institute, and I'm at the regional fund, and I must say, being at the regional fund, of course, also there are obstacles for us, but they are on another level. So for me, it's also been a transmission from one place to another. But in general, of course, I think there are not enough money to create the films. I mean, in Sweden, we have too little money, I would say, although Väst has a lot of money. There is too little money. And I think also, and this was spoken a little bit from Tomas before, the tradition also for Väst, but I think for the national funds, is to give out money a little bit to everything. So an obstacle to be taken care of and to put in a little bit more of bravery is to to be more brave when it comes to choose the films, the funding, because now I think we spread it out a little bit too much, and that leads to, we have a horrible situation in the cinemas in Sweden right now, where nothing works except Batman and, yeah, you know, the rest of it. And Spider-Man, all the, yeah, you know, the men. But anyhow, I mean, so one thing that I think a public funder must do is to be more critical when it comes to choose, and not picking the berries all over the place, but really try to find and have an idea together with the production companies and the other funding parts. What are the, when we talk about the films, what are the films that actually can succeed in cinemas? What in the new arena that we have now, because it's not the old things that work, it's something else, and we need together find discussions and ways to develop those kinds of projects, and to put more money in those projects. So it's, but I think being in this Crossroads and having taken part of the study, of course, a bit more maybe than the rest of you, I think it's a momentum that we really have to use, because people are so, there are so many things happening, and people are really up to change things. The funds, the production companies, the financiers, the whole industry. So I think now is also the time, maybe then, that together we can try to make changes. It's hard to change, and it's difficult to change, but I think this is actually a time where we can succeed in changing and find new ways.
Thanks a lot. It's full of hope, this message. Gregory, you are the head of a fund that is very inspiring for many people in Europe. And I know that since more than a year, you are in the process of reflection of the change of strategy. So you are an example of flexibility. Can you speak a little bit about what you are becoming?
Yes, so I'm from France. Philippe knows about it because he's working with us on the changes, so he knows very well. I think maybe I can say about, of course, I agree with, totally agree with the report and what you said. We are already swimming in the gray world. We are all coming from the whole world, and we have to face the new world. So it's obvious. I would say about hope. Yesterday, Börjeson said cinema is an industry of hope. And I think my job for more than 30 years is to work for, to try to help, and to help directors, producers, to help for hope. And I really think my job is not changing. It will be the same. So it's a kind of hope too. And I think it's very important to say that. But we have to adapt, we have to be more flexible, we have to be, of course, maybe less paper. I think we have not more paper. But we need the same thing for the new world. It's always a script, it's always a budget, it's always a financing plan, a cast, and it's okay for us. And the only thing we ask is for more indication about what we will spend on my territory, and that's okay, and I can decide, we can decide. And I think the basis will be the basis elements will be the same. So it's not so much a changing world, but it's a globalized world, so we have to manage with it. That's the main thing. Was it a question?
What should be your strategy for the future?
The strategy, we are a fund only based on cinema co-production, and then I think really it's impossible, and it was a long discussion together. It's impossible to stay only on cinema. We have to enlarge our activities, and that's what we're trying to do. But if you think, I think one of the problem we can have in a globalized situation is a regional fund has to be based on a quite not too small surface. I think it's important. Our region is twice the Belgian surface, so it's quite big. And if you are big in a big region or big country, you will have maybe more lack of capacity than, and the business is there. So you have to choose. That's the main problem for us. The business is there, the business will remain the same, I think, and bigger. So now the only question is we have to choose between a large amount of projects and diverse projects. That's the question for me.
Thank you. You know, when you are the moderator of panel, it's still a joy to have Bero in the panel because you don't have to ask a question. he has a statement to say.
Okay.
Okay, so
I can speak for him.
I was very much looking forward to the report. I've read it with fantastic, great interest. In fact, I made it mandatory reading to my entire staff and even to my supervisory board, because I think it's, even though it was a Nordic focus, obviously Netherlands wasn't fully included. Many of the things there, I think, were the reason why I went into public funding to begin with 2 years ago. As you know, I was running a film festival, Rotterdam, for 5 years, and before that, I was, like the panel before, an independent producer. So many of the points that are there are, have been on the agenda, are on the agenda on a daily basis, on a yearly basis for public funders to realize what that is and how that can be implemented in a better way. So that's great. I have many objections to some of the semantics that are there that are almost tendacious, which are maybe less relevant than first letting into that remark. I think it's important to consider that the operational scope of public film funders has hugely increased over the last maybe decade or so. If I were just in the business of saying yes or no to a selective or automatic feature film, I would have a cushion job. We're looked at for anything film related in the Netherlands. So it's short films, it's documentaries, it's series, it's experimental, it's art, it's film festivals, it's education, it's training, it's professionalization, it's making sure that distributors are granted. We're now even in a situation where, because of COVID, we are funding directly cinemas to keep programming Dutch films rather than just something blah blah men. So the operational scope is hugely involved, which also means that our responsibility as policy preparing bodies, almost, but not quite, lobbyists for the film sector on a national and European level with regards to legislation and influence to policy, political policy, has also become bigger. At the heart of it is all of that same love that I was very happy that Tomas also reaffirmed just now, about the relevance of public funders as not just guardians of or supporters of, but empowerment institutions, facilitators, taxpayer-based in most cases, for the creators like the creatives that come up with a diverse, pluriform, multifaceted, critical, artistic, beautiful cinema that we all love, that in best cases indeed also not ventures into the gray zone, but into the sweet spot of where commercial interest and cultural interests actually align. So that's all fantastic. And I also want to say that it's especially relevant because it wasn't mentioned throughout the day, and I haven't gone through a single day without mentioning it so far, the luxury and also blessing that we're able to discuss the relevance of cultural expression through audiovisual narrative, whether it's cinema or TV or whatever, in the setting, and the way that we're doing it in the messy system we have within Belgium, as I just saw before, or the EU, or in any working democracy, as opposed to what the alternative is, has become even more relevant. This is my very cumbersome way of saying that cultural expression, cinematic expression, all its diversity relates to power struggles, which in the worst case are invasions of another country. So the key points I think that we are all taking into consideration and should be as a starting point for an ongoing discussion, which let's not pretend this happened today. This was 5 years ago. We could saw things coming, and everyone was aware there needs to be things. But let's do realize the value of what that public funding means, with the respect to the actual creators upon which's work we rely on the cultural bliss that we have in our respective countries and in the European Union.
Can I say something just about...
Yes, of course.
Yeah, well, continuing on that track, and also about the obstacles and really the importance, talking about trying to find what relevance we have, which you explained, of course, but I think we have to do a job explaining that over and over again to the people who give us the money. So they don't think that just because there are the globalization happening, the platforms entering, if you don't know your industry, you do something else, you're a politician over there, and you think, well, it all looks fine to me because I can see all these things at my TV or my computer at home. Why should there be the public funding? So it's been for granted for many, many years, and I think that's a crucial point right now, that you really have to find the arguments to explain to the financiers of public funds why they should continue to give that money. So that's like the argument job we have to do.
And I can add, it's about visibility. We need, it's a kind of new thing. It's not about only cultural policy and so on, all the arguments. We really need now to prove that we can give visibility to our political body and to political and financiers. So we need maybe not only streamers, but quite big or commercial films, 1, 2, 3 per year. It's necessary now, and it's quite a big change.
Yes, of course.
It's not a question, but it's maybe a comment. I'm not a producer, and but I would like to. I think that also supporting with public fund is also supporting an industry in each country. I mean, this is why we have this policy in France, because I'm French, and by giving the money, by the CNC giving the money, and all the laws we have is supporting an industry. And as David said, if at least the producer or only line producer, the question is how we can help. I mean, the fund help to the producer to be producer, and the producer, the characteristic of a producer is owning rights. So it's not only financing movies, but it's also to give the property and the patrimoniality of a company, and with that they can discuss with the streamer and with the others. And I think this is also a role for a public funding to support and the industry in front of higher and more important companies. So this is my I don't know, it's a comment or a question, I don't know.
It's indeed a good comment. In the previous panel about Belgium, you can hear that, for example, Walimage has created a special line to finance the industry without the passage to a movie. So it's maybe a way that we have to think about. And through the movie, of course. But
fund a movie, doesn't do anything without property and getting richer and richer movie after movie. You know, it's not only to give people to see movies, it's also to give property to companies. So something under, I don't know, it's a...
Calm down, lady. Can I respond, please? Because basically, for instance, for the Netherlands, and I'm sure it's with many other public funders, you are not eligible for any subsidy from the Netherlands Film Fund if you are merely a line producer. Full stop. Yes. We do not give any taxpayer money directly towards media companies that are within our own country or that are elsewhere. So that's not happening. If the producer cannot prove, the applicant cannot prove that they are indeed in control of the IP, their position, creative control, etc., they don't get any subsidies. So that's already a given. It's through the productions, which is something else, and that's important to clarify, that we're not an economic fund to keep the business afloat. and to make sure people can, do their thing. It's project related. Under that condition, you have to be able to show that you're the one. So in order, and this is one of the most important elements that are also very much at length discussed here, is that we do need to make sure that we are faster, more transparent maybe, but that we devote the full focus of our even small fishy financial power towards that segment. Also for TV series, which is, we don't have it quite yet, but to make sure that there's an element where you are in a bargaining position of relevance to be able to maintain that rights. And again, then fulfill both nice elements of being able to do something which has meaning in a cultural aspect, but if you're able to make money through it in whatever way, shape or form, that's just grand as well. And I wanted to just give two short examples, cut me off anytime,
I will.
Because what I think Klaus was saying from the Danish Film Institute, we've had that in the same position. We've had projects that had funding, bigger budget productions, at least for our term, so 5 to 12 million of productions which had all the elements: selective funding, automatic funding, even broadcaster commitment, distributor MGs, and a Netflix or even an Amazon deal accompanied with the great benefit that the producers were in control, were maintaining their rights, but through that construction were also highly more visible and seen all over the world, which is, again, not the gray zone, but the sweet spot.
Yes,
And it's the same in France. We are not allowed to finance a line producer yet, but it can change. And if I am cynical, there is no particular interest for a region to be more on a delegate producer. There's no difference for us, line producer or delegate producer. If you spend money, if you spend for crew and so on in our region, it's okay. So if I'm cynical, it's not important for us. It's a higher level question. I think it's a political question and an ideological question, but not a question.
Tomas?
Yeah, I will say that I totally agree with Bero. That's the case for most funds, whatever they are, transnational, national, regional funds, but there are exceptions in Europe today, and they actually exist both on national and regional level. And that's important to understand. It's not only a regional issue. You can also find national exceptions where you do things where you don't really care who is owning the underlying rights. And that's also specific type of funding systems in specific type of countries. Also one of Europe's biggest country, I can say. But and then we can talk about that later. But it's the case. Gray zone is not our invention. It's not the report's invention. All terminology is someone else's invention. I mean, gray zone started popping up in the dialogue seminars, because a lot of production companies were extremely interested to explore what can you do in the gray zone. And we will come back to that in the last part. What can you do in the gray zone? How can we benefit from combining, so to speak, the traditional European system, because Europe is the old world in all historical lessons that most of us have had. It was the old world. Then Christopher Columbus went across the Atlantic Sea and thought he came to India, but he came to America. And America was called the New World. And a lot of people that we met in the beginning when we made these interviews, they talked about the old world and the new world and meant basically the European system and the American system. And it's not about anything being older or younger or anything. It's two different systems because it's two different business logics. And there is some sort of ideological clash between them that you can see, and a lot of people can identify because it's not the same. And I can understand why you get annoyed, because we try to say in the beginning, but I am definitely, because I'm a big supporter of the old world. I really love to belong to the old world, to the European world. So I think it's very, because it was not really, and then why we use them in the report is basically because they were mentioned by so many. And when we also made these dialogue seminars, it sometimes proved to be a door opener to a much more interesting discussion, because then you needed to define what is the European thinking and what is the difference between that type of thinking, if we want to safeguard that type of thinking, and the old American business logic, because of course it's the same logic that studios used for decades and decades and decades, so it's not a big difference. The difference is that they are here and they are working with our talents, they are working with our producers, and they are producing a lot of local contents in many parts of Europe.
No,
One last thing,
it's my turn. It's my turn. But you will see, I'm an amazing moderator because I am the only one in the world to give the floor to Bero again, but on a special point, because when speaking about the support to industry, till now, the best way to do it was to territorialization of the expenses of the movie we support. And you are against that, no?
I think we need to, and this was especially during COVID, needed to think of anything that would work to safeguard the relevance of international co-productions. And you're referring to the notion that Guy from the Luxembourg Film Fund and I were trying to develop or implement, that at a certain point, expenditure obligations can become the problem of getting an international co-production off the ground. In its complexity, especially during COVID, because of its logistical nightmares, and in certain regards also, you could say also in a sense of sustainability for the planet, or that they're instrumental in creating something which is not inherently from the creative element. And I think that's not always a beneficial system, and I think it would be a relevant element to consider, and follow up to the report maybe, of in which regard we should or are able to let go of eligibility criteria completely if we take a larger scheme into consideration of how many films you are actually co-producing with territories, that it levels out, and that you can make every single euro that you do have to put in a production count for even more, rather than just focus on just spend as much money in my little territory, so that it will benefit this part, which can be in conflict with several of the other parties.
Yeah, just a short comment, because I think that's interesting, really, the discussion on priorities, because there have been not priorities, but different priorities parallel to each other, and coming from regional fund, where the expenditure, of course, is one of the main things, but also combined with the artistic level. I think the time, and this is interesting times we live in, actually, where we could have a discussion whether which way what should we prioritize? What is, by the end of the day, the important thing? Is it the expenditure, or is it actually that we do content that has a relevance and we have an idea on why we want to tell the stories? So I don't have an answer, but I think these are questions that are really on the table now to be discussed.
Well, for me, it's clear. If I say to my political body, we have a big series, Netflix series with big expenditures, and we don't do it, it's not good, we are going to do a minority co-production with small expenditure. I'm not credible.
But I think also
that's clear. I want to be clear.
Yeah.
So we need, there is two questions. We need to have expenditures, we need to have a quite level of spend on our territory. It's a very good argument to maintain the fund and regional fund. I really think so, even if it's different in the future. And there is also another question about automatic or selective, and we need to be selective. If we are not selective, only I think the state level can be automatic, because you need a lot of money to be automatic. If we have a small fund with an automatic system, it will be totally spread between the projects, and it's our death. So we need to be selective. It's not a question, and we need to have quite a good level of spend on our territory. I think it's two questions. It will never change.
Are you sure? Because I think it's interesting to have the discussion with the politicians, because the world is changing. So I mean, that's really what the report is all about. The world is changing. There are new ideas, there are new situations, new cooperations with new kinds of partners. And I think it's at least towards the politicians in our region, it's our task to explain to them, this is how we look upon the world. Now we have the great report to show them, but to try to have a discussion on, I mean, I'm not saying that we should stay with the expenditure and the kind of whatever we do now. That might be the idea of what we do in 5 years, but it's also it's up to us to try to explain what the new world looks like and how we could act in that and to keep the relevance.
Yes. And just to follow up just real quickly on that, because I appreciate your explanation of where the old new stuff comes from. But you know what we as film funders do not spend money on? Marketing for ourselves. We do it for communication, not for marketing. So when we speak to politicians to make sure that our level of funding is increased or whatever, we're facing another party that hires lobbyists and does great marketing. So when there's a report that puts us into a framing of being critiqued or being the old traditional rusty old bureaucratic system, we're fighting a backwards uphill fight to make sure we're actually within the regards to the producers and what we're trying to do, we are running up front. That's a little bit of a challenge. That's my only critique on the report.
Yeah, and I think that's also in a way the answer, because if you don't start arguing, you shouldn't, I mean, I can understand that you say we shouldn't market the fund itself. But
I'm not saying that.
But it's very tricky, because, I mean, a fund is also a brand. A fund is also a brand. And I think, and that's a little bit what Kristina is talking about, because becoming more selective, care more about quality than quantitative measures and things like that, that gives something back to the brand of the fund. And I think brand of funds will be crucial in the future, as it is for something like a theater. If you have just a publicly financed theater, they will never say that it's not important to market the brand. It's extremely important to market the brand. And I think we need, as public funders, since I really see myself as a public funder since I worked with that for decades. I mean, I see myself as a public funder. I think we need to shapen the arguments, because I totally agree. We need to, because otherwise there is a big risk that the world will just rush over us. Because I totally agree also with those arguments are already there. I know where they come from also in a Swedish context, because you can think, oh, this is Sweden, welfare state, a lot of money given away to arts and culture. No, it's not so easy, because there is political parties that actually wants, and they are not only these extreme right-wingers, that says, okay, let's cut funding, because it's not necessary anymore. And then you need to make, I mean, this is to care for public funding. You need to be able to discuss yourself, and you need to change. That's the only thing we are saying. And we love public funds. We have always loved public funds. We belong to public funds and to the old world.
Maybe an applause, no? So it's really a passionate discussion. I have to stop you, but a very last question, but please just answer in a few words for three of us, of you. Tomorrow morning, I suppose you will spend the night reading the report again, and tomorrow morning, what will be your first priority in your fund? Kristina.
Well, I know I'm not going to do it tomorrow morning, but anyhow, I think we need to find out who we should cooperate with. Find new partners, team up, open up, have more discussions, and create, listening to Erik from Lemming Film, inspiration, really. Find new ways of cooperating for talent development, for whatever is needed.
Thank you.
For me, and it's my job now, is to convince my political body that we have to change and to keep part of the old world and to be in the new world. So it's my job for
I'm praying for you, my brother. And Bero.
Luckily, I already read the report a couple times, so that's off the list. I have a board meeting in an hour, and I'm interested to hear whether they have read the report as well. To be honest, tomorrow morning I'm curious to find out, because we were also asked to see if we could help find refugee places in the Netherlands for people fleeing the Ukraine. We've already tried to give as much support as we can to the International Coalition for Filmmakers at Risk to take charge on that. I think that has taken more precedence, and as we go along, it will be more towards creating also awareness amongst public broadcasters, how they fit into the entire scheme, and figuring out how we can bridge a pyramid of very, very broad development. We need to be way more diverse and inclusive than we have been so far as an industry. Look at what's happening here today. While at the same time reaching towards a little pyramid at the top, where you actually give much more money to fewer films, and that will be a struggle in itself.
Thank you. You were short and brilliant. So it's time for the third panel. And maybe, Tomas, we spoke a lot already about the gray zone, but it will be the center of the last panel. So maybe you can try to define as concretely as possible this concept. I also have somebody for you, because some feel asleep between the beginning and now. And so we are ready to enter the gray zone.
Yes, let's go. We are in the gray zone. We are in the gray zone. No, but I mean, this was quite interesting, because it was sort of a thing that happened while we made the study, and when we made all this dialogue. And it's very important that we made dialogue seminars with public funders, with broadcasters, with enormous amounts of producers, and also with cinema owners, exhibitors, with everyone except distributors. We haven't made a single one with distributors. I think that's a little bit sad, because that would have been a plus for us. But then this question about the gray zone evolved. It basically came from many producers, and they defined it a little bit different depending on who they were. And very often it came from companies belonging to the very big production conglomerates that we have in Europe. The Banier, Endemol Shine type of production companies belonging to that group, Fremantle-owned companies, those type of companies. They were really addressing the gray zone. And I thought it was also very interesting when I listened to the interview during, I know Alexandra will listen as well, when they interviewed Lars Blomgren. He's the head of drama in the Banier group, during the Gothenburg Tree Drama Vision event. And he had some examples. And interestingly enough, all those examples were projects made with a global streaming giant. None were without a streaming giant. And one was particularly interesting. It was a Finnish example. Yle, public service broadcaster, their production company, and Netflix. That was a combination for that drama series. And you could see a lot of those examples, more in the drama series area actually than you see in the feature film area, but you can see some examples. So you can see sort of an area where public, it could be public service broadcasters, it could be public funding, it could be a production company, it could be a global or a regional streaming giant, where they should do something, they should make a deal. Because that's also what this is about. They should make a deal. And the problem for the public funder is the lack of transparency, to be very honest. You can understand the deal that is made between the public body and the production company or whatever traditional partners you have there. But then there is a part of the deal that is non-transparent. And then, of course, there is a lot of questions that are there. It's a license deal, but we don't know anything about the license deal. And then the interesting thing is who holds power? If there is Yle and Netflix and Animal Shine in Finland production, who holds power? In the end of the day, because this is also very different when we look to drama series compared to feature film, who holds power? Because it's not, even if there is an ownership for the production company, it's not at all 100% sure that they actually have the artistic and creative control. And I think those questions are very interesting to discuss also for public funds, because we need to sort of make up our mind. We have not an answer to this. Make up our mind. What are our positions in this zone? What positions should we take? And also this deals with some of the typically extremely often discussed questions in Europe. How should we be, how can we find a new, joint, and common definition of independent producer? Because we have so many answers today that we have heard from public bodies in Europe, how you want to define an independent producer now and in the future, in the midterm future. And of course, IP. The ownership of IP, the ownership of underlying rights. How should we understand? Because I think we all agree about the importance that underlying rights are owned by the production companies, and they have control over that. We all agree upon that. But how should we understand what happens in this area where there is a lot of compromises and a lot of things going on?
Yes, and it's totally magic, but the panel is already there. I don't have to call them, so it's wonderful, and I hope that they will help us to understand what is happening. Those people, guys, are superheroes because we call them the Europeans. And so let me introduce Martin Dawson. He has a superpower. He can connect anyone with anyone else in Europe because he is deputy head of unit Audiovisual Industry and Media Support Program in the DG Connect of the European Commission. So Alexandra is a Catwoman, ready to give her life to defend the producer. That's why she is the managing director of the European Producer Club. And Chris, last but not least, and Chris Marcich, this eminent member of the EFAD's board, it will be your definition for this panel, must be, but in real life, a Superman. Because I saw him in almost all the panel of this forum since yesterday. So, if you are not too tired, Chris, I have a question for you. The first question is evident. Do you have the feeling that we are operating in a gray zone? Who wants? Alexandra, the Catwoman.
Yes, we are definitely entering into a gray zone. But maybe before answering that question, I would like to step a little bit back. I think there is no opposition between old world and new world. It's just a transformation of the world. And your report is a kind of COVID, is an acceleration process of self-assessment that we all have to do ourselves. So, and for me, what has changed, what is the most important change, is the fact that there is a pressure to change the paradigm. We, as producers, we are proposing content, and then distributors are building the audience. Whereas with the streamers, they are responding to a demand. And this is a big change of the paradigm. I don't believe in it, but this change is really happening. And we have to continue for cultural reasons, for diversity. We have to continue to do as we do. And for that, we need the public fund. We need the public fund to share the risks with us, to discover talent, to tackle subject that no one wants to tackle. If I've asked someone, do you want to see a film with a paraplegic and a black guy? No one will have answered yes, and it has reached it's one of the biggest success in Europe. So we need public fund to do that, to create IP and to keep IP. It's my favorite subject, as you all know. Everyone, we're speaking IP is looking at me now, so it's key for us, and that's true that we are entering into a gray zone in many ways. First, on a regulatory basis, thanks to the AVMS directive, that directive that is imposing obligation to the streamers. In some countries, there are obligations of investment for the streamers, and these obligations are linked with the retention of rights and a certain duration in the rights as well. France is the most sophisticated so far, but we can see that in some countries there is not condition at all. So there is a gray zone here because there is a difference in regulation, but also in certain deals as well. The fact is that we, as independent producer, and even for the bigger one that you are mentioning, Banijay and Fremantle, we don't have any bargaining power when it comes to negotiation for the contract. It's take it or leave it. And we have to find a way to work together with the streamers. They are our new clients, and they are here to stay. I disagree that they will disappear, and the situation in the world is showing that no, they are going to stay for a long time. So we need to learn to work together, and we need to force them to adapt to our business model. That's why I'm here, and that's what I'm doing at the EPC.
Another reaction to this question? Are you evolving in a gray zone? Maybe I can help you, Chris, putting some concept on the table and asking you, is this in the gray zone or is it still black and white? For example, the IPs, gray zone or black and white?
I'm in the gray zone, you can see, so no dilemmas. It's in the gray zone because it's not sorted out in the same way in all countries, in all regulatory regimes. And so it sits in a gray zone now. It's clearly important also in our country. Other gray zones? We're, as a country, Croatia is it's finding its way into that gray zone. We're trying to marry what the fund does and what is being done by that big money that everybody else is swimming in. We're not at the moment. We're not awash in money from streamers. Our investment obligations are so small because we were essentially prevented from doing more. And so now we're struggling. The directive, the AVMS directive, is not extremely helpful. It could be much more helpful. It doesn't answer the question of smaller countries whose interests and whose situation is hard to find in the report, I must add. I mean, I don't mean to be critical. I know you had to focus on what is the important, where all the money is, where all the activity is, but there's a whole part here that's missing. And I think that's unfortunate, and I think it's also unfortunate that we don't talk about some of the legislative, some of the regulatory fixes that will be needed to deal with the obvious shortcomings of the AVMS directive, especially from the point of view of smaller countries, where cultural diversity is not being served, and where if we still have cultural diversity as a pillar of Europe, as part of the treaty, we're failing.
Yes, I present you as a member of EFAD, of the board of EFAD, but you are also, I must say it, the head of the Croatian Film Fund.
And the head of but as film centers, I think there's also a tendency to overlook the fact that film centers are adapting to the changes, that there are changes being made in my film center and other film centers to try to figure out how we deal with these new realities, how we fit in, how we serve our public service interest, at the same time, how we're able really to get into that gray zone and make it work in our ecosystem. Sorry, I talked too long.
You want to react?
Yeah, just to a little bit. Yeah, that's been a tricky thing when we wrote the main text, how we should deal with, because there are, of course, differences between small, but it's also differences when we look at when we look to Europe as a whole, and that's very much about, okay, like the Nordics, it consists of quite small countries. Yes, Sweden is a comparatively big country, but Norway is not, Denmark is not, Iceland is not, Finland is not. But I mean, in those territories, you can exclude a little bit Finland, but in those territories you can say the globals are there with enormous power. They have an enormous power in the Nordics because they spend so much money on local content. And that transforms so much of the sector, of the thinking, and it's not so easy. So it only transforms the raison d'être for production companies. It also changes the situation for, let's talk about distributors or rights management companies, because suddenly a lot of companies that produced cinema films before, they are not producing cinema films anymore, because that's not the most interesting field to be in. And absolutely not the most profitable field to be in. So whatever you think, because you also need to survive, you need to develop your company, there's so many other reasons, so you are drawn. And then we hope that the territorial, because when you can read all the territorial reports, of course then we cover more or less all parts of Europe. And if you read those reports, yes, you can see some specific differences, but they are more perhaps obvious when we talk about public bodies, when we talk about actually production companies, for instance, because production companies' thinkings are not so different in different parts of Europe. They are quite similar. They have a lot the same type of opinions and views, but they feel also pressured by reality to utilize opportunities, because I totally agree with Alexandra, but there is another side of another hat in the production company, and that hat is basically, okay, but let's grab this, because that can make us survive the next couple of years, or it can make us be more independent in other fields, because that's an argument we also met. If we do something and have some sort of 13 to 20% production company fee when we do something for a global, then we can use that money actually to develop ourselves. We can stay in power ourselves, and I can understand the thinking, even if I think it's sad. I mean, I can understand why you think so. It's sort of a practicality, a reality.
If I can answer, we, in our group, the European Producers Club, 150 independent producers, we are all fighting against this contract. But many of them are accepting it, of course, because we need to work, but we are fighting because we have that idea that IP is important, and we know that if we don't make revenues out of the IP that we created, we won't be able to continue to develop. Out of 10 projects that have been developed and that are costing more and more because there is a race for talents, only one will be produced, meaning the losses are huge for an independent producer. So if we function only on that business model, the regional ones, then we are dead. We know we have 2 years in front of us, and we have that clear view. But that's not the same for the young producers. We organize a panel in Les Arcs on that subject, having a young producer, and for them it's cool to work with a streamer, and they don't care about IP really, because they don't care about the value. They don't know the value. They don't know what it will bring to them. So we decided to alert some film school in Denmark, in Spain. And we discovered that it was the same in every country. So there is also a training session, Martin, that you need to do about the importance of IP. You need to protect us. You need to give us a regulation, a terms of trade, to introduce that for the industry, to protect our IP, and then also a training session.
Thank you, Alexandra, to introduce Martin, because we never heard nothing coming from the Commission. So. I've heard that you are also writing a big report for the end of the year, and so what is your look on this new world?
So yes, the grey zone. I think in any case, it's a time of change. It's more complicated. There's no one single model. It's more fragmented. There are lots of questions out there, and indeed. We have been asked, as part of the Media Action Plan, which I'm sure you've all heard of, to the European Media Action Plan, to produce our first ever outlook, where we try and look into the fog as much as possible into the future and see what are the main trends driving change in the audiovisual industry. And some of the key words I heard were globalization, ecosystem. So indeed, I think the whole international aspect is key. The fact that European films still do not travel very much across borders. Within Europe, they travel on average to 3 or 4 territories. Beyond Europe, it's less. You know that the US grabs about 60% of the box office in the EU. The EU grabs about 3% of the box office in the US. So we could, there are issues with the streamers. We will like everybody else, address these and analyze these in our studies. But we also have to think about, we also have to think about how we can change, how the European audiovisual industry can change and continue changing. It's not like, oh God, all of a sudden we have to change. I mean, continue changing. So the international aspect is important. We come from the European Commission. The European aspect is important for us. Our raison d'etre is to promote a European audiovisual industry. So one where French films are seen in Germany and Spain, and vice versa. And it's surprisingly low, the market share for so-called non-national European films. So we would like to see the audiovisual industry look at Europe as a native market. We'd like to see a situation where an Italian producer doesn't think of Germany as some faraway foreign country. It's a European country with an audience, with a market. We can work there. We should work there. And there are, of course, people working there. Creative Europe Media exists now for 30 years. But there's a lot of potential to be more European, to do more at European level. And beyond the industrial business aspects, like others, I do have to acknowledge, the war in Ukraine, and that we need this cultural glue to bring us together, keep us together. And yes, cinema is a powerful cultural glue, and we can do more, again, to be more European. I also see this discussion in that light. The ecosystem, because I don't think, your points are very powerful. The producer, which in Europe often is an SME, what kind of negotiating power does the producer have with a big global giant? That's a powerful point. It's true. At the same time, it's not the only issue, I think. I mean, the other issue is how comes there's only 2 or 3 big global streamers? You know, this issue of concentration. Why is why are the online players so few? There are about 400, in fact. There are about 400 streamers in Europe. There's only 2 or 3 that are household names. Why is that? You know, I mean, part of the market power is, well, if there were more streamers competing against each other, then that would rebalance the market as well. You know, so it's a multifaceted aspect. Having said that, we, Creative Europe Media, have always been for, again, our raison d'être is to promote the independent players. Our definition is that independence means they are not majority controlled by audiovisual media service providers. Of course, the word independent, correct me if I'm wrong, but the word independent historically meant independent from who? Independent from the broadcasters. Voilà. So the issue of independence was always there, and the issue of retention of intellectual property rights was always there. The situation is not uniform, by the way, across Europe on that issue, vis-à-vis the broadcasters. It's not like in every country that the broadcasters, even the public broadcasters, will easily grant retention of IP to the producer. So still with the broadcasters, in some countries there's an issue ongoing. As regards the global streamers, we also hear very clearly the need for transparency, whereas in terms of like audiences, for example, and on the business models, we acknowledged in the Media Action Plan, which we adopted in December 2020, that there is not a single model. I mean, again, we hear loud and clear the concerns about the buyout model. But we would welcome, if there's anybody out there today or later, of course, if there's more data, hard evidence about these different models. You know, how important are they in quantitative terms? You know, which proportion of these of the collaborations with the streamers are on a buyout model? Which proportion is on a licensing model? Which proportion is on a more proportionate model? It's foggy at this stage. So we would welcome very much some evidence and data, and that will help us also in our studies. And by the way, last but not least, congratulations again for your report, which really is very stimulating.
Tomas and Alexandra want to react to some part of the. You want to be the first, Tomas?
Yeah, but I think Chris also wanted.
Okay.
Did you want to say something?
Go ahead, Al.
Yes, yeah, but what I think is important is that of course, if we don't speak about the global American-owned giants, I think streaming is a potential to get a much better spread of European films, because I think of course some films will work in cinemas and movie theaters, but a lot of films can work in another way. So I think we need to think about circulation of European films in a more flexible way, because I think it's very crucial that because I think we are more successful actually in circulating drama series in Europe than we are in circulating films. I mean, there is a much bigger variety in many countries of drama series in so many different languages compared to films. That's a challenge.
Alexandra?
Yes, first to answer Martin, you know that producers are locked in NDA closure. They cannot speak about the contract, but if you want data, it's very easy. Every original production that is done by the streamers are without leaving the IP. They keep the IP. So it's very simple. You count, there's 17 in the Nordic, 27 in France. It's very simple, and the licensing is only happening when the film is done, has been produced by an independent producer. So the data, I can give it to you in 1 hour. So, and you will see that it's not only in terms of number, it's in terms of also of money involved. You will be surprised. It's a huge amount of money that is going elsewhere, not in Europe. That is not staying, in Europe, not making our company richer and not allowing our industry to grow. To answer your question, as EPC, we discuss many times, do we produce too many films? And as producers, we need also to ask us that question. And the answer we finally achieved was that we are not producing too many films because we never know if a film is going to be good or not. We are distributing in the same way too many films. And we are in favor sometimes to distribute the films online. And we have seen, for instance, that Eurimage has changed its rules when it comes to co-production to allow, in certain countries, release online. And I did it myself for a film I co-produced. It was a film, a Spanish thriller, very good, but it was not. I didn't expect a lot of audiences in theaters, and I had a good offer for online release, and it was perfect. It worked, perfectly well, and as a producer, I'm super happy. The film was released in its own country, in theaters in Spain, and I think we should be flexible and not having in mind the obligation of releasing all the films in every country. On theaters. It's important to have in a country, but not in all country.
Maybe I have to. Chris want to say, yeah, okay.
No, just a few words. I think in answer to the Commission, Alexandra is right. There are data out there, and it's clear that those few platforms you mentioned, they're gatekeepers who have rights that cut across Europe, pan-European rights, global rights, and it's the answer to how they emerged. They started with libraries on which they had pan-world world rights to content that they or their parents had created. So there's not a lot of mystery in how they emerged or why they are the way they are and successful. And I also agree with what you said about the fact that they offer opportunities. There's no doubt that they offer opportunities, especially for series. And that's part of that gray zone we talked about earlier that we need to participate in.
Okay, I was saying it's difficult for me, but that we have to stop the panel, but because I don't know if you know, but our Swedish friends offer to everybody a lunch, and we don't want to miss this, of course. But it's not totally finished. I just will ask you to stand up, please, but stay on the stage, because I'm calling back the 6 other participants. Please come also. And during this time, I have to say to Jean-Yves that he lose the privilege of the most nice shoes, because Alexandra has nicest shoes. So, are you there, everybody? Yes, it's for you too, Tomas. You also have to stand up. And Jean-Yves, yes, Jean-Yves was fleeing away because I said that Alexandra has nicest shoes than you. but it's not only to make picture, you know.
Marketing, yes.
it's. No, but please stay. It's not finished. It's not finished. No, you know, it's it's like in the circus. It's like in the circus, we are ready to make the grand finale. And what is the grand finale? I will ask you one question, and everybody has 30 seconds to answer. Let's say 1 minute for Bero. And so, please, Tomas, give the mic to your colleague, because I want you to say to me, and it's a big question. I want you to say to me, what will be the future of Public Film Fund in 2030? Will they have disappeared? Will they be the master of the world? We are waiting for your prediction, but you have only 1 minute, please.
Okay, is this working? Yeah? My middle name is Nostradamus, so I will now predict the future, 2030. And I just want to say 2030 is not that far away. So to start with, it's not like you can't imagine, but it's 7, 8 years away. This is of course connected to hope. I'm a person who will hope for things, so I definitely think that there will be public funds. I also think that, let me speak for the Nordic countries more than, because there are so big differences between funds in Europe and how they work and function. But I definitely think we will have public funds in the Nordic countries, but they have changed and maybe developed in ways becoming more clear in their perspectives of what they should achieve. For us, I think we've started more cooperations and we have developed a lot of talent.
Thank you. You can give the mic, yes.
So you may say I'm a dreamer as well. No, two things. I forgot to mention what is important for the Film Fund also to think about is the education of the audience from school to university. I think it's really key because otherwise there would be no more there would be no more audience. And I think you guys are doing good. Don't change anything if you want, because everything works, and we should adapt regional funding, national funding, optimize everything. But please make the difference when we have IP or no IP, or when it's audiovisual or film for the cinema.
Wonderful. Next time you can sing it. You may say I'm a dreamer.
So 2030, I think, there is a big future for film funds, especially in smaller countries. They will be expected to produce even more for those whom they serve. I think there will be more money. I think there will be a greater balance between automatic and selective funding. And I think that there will be more flexibility in the way in which funds operate.
Tomas, you can say something, Tomas.
Yeah, but I say something last.
Okay.
So in 2 words, literally more European. I'd say more European. I think there's potential to go beyond national borders a lot more in terms of producing, distributing content which is appreciated across Europe and across the world. I think the European and international dimension, we have to reconnect with that. Thanks.
Europe and beyond.
I would say diverse, faster, predictable, but also I would like maybe to put a context on the public fund. They will be, in difficulties with the time that are coming, crisis, war, and their fund may be tackled, maybe decreased by some member states, and they will need us, the industry, to support them, and we will be there.
Fine.
And by 2030 at the latest, my term at the Film Fund will have ended. And my hope would be that we could do as much as we can away with regulations, bureaucracy, and fully shift the proof of burden elsewhere, and are able to make decisions based on trust, empowerment, which lead to something that would resemble a diverse, inclusive, sustainable film sector with cultural reference.
Wonderful. May you give it's a COVID mic, you.
Thank you. No, I think in 2030 the funds will be there supporting the local and the European industry. And I think we've just heard that it's going to be without outrageous spending obligations. So that's a big step forward.
Well, I won't be there anymore. I will be fishing with Tomas and Philippe, probably. But I think I'm trying to prepare a new generation of film funder, and new maybe a new generation. Yes.
Fine.
As I'm the last one to talk, I will not be optimistic. I will be utopist, and hopefully, politicians will understand that film funds are and our business are like a virtuous system, and that we can, through public money, develop talents and industry, and they will have understood by that time that they need to refinance the film funds.
Fine. And last but not least, I said it.
Yes, I think there's a good future for most film funds in Europe. I'm also a bit worried about the political situation that's evolving, and with other things happening that might make this into a much more crucial issue than we think. But I also think that public film fund by 2030 yet again has become expert organization in understanding the total ecosystem for production of films and audiovisual work, a sort of more holistic perspective, because I think this is something that somebody needs to take that responsibility and give back to everybody that works in and struggles in this sector. I think public funding is much more flexible, faster, less bureaucracy. I really hope so, and have learned really to prioritize what is really important.
Thank you, Tomas. And now it's time to close.